Dr. McKnight?
Sure. That was a great job, Mr. Vicente. It's great to be here on the panel with colleagues, just having our discussion, and it's interesting for me being last because they said much of what I would like to share from the perspective of being a school principal. It's my pleasure to be here this afternoon speaking with all of you about something that I could talk about all day long because I love my job and I love the work of being a principal and educating students and building teacher capacity to do that effectively. So I will do my very best to make sure that I get this done in 10 to 15 minutes, since I know that my challenge would be speaking about this forever. It was great to be here today because I enjoy reading current research around education. Being in the role of Principal of the Year has involved me in ways of really understanding policy around education. So that has broadened my perspective in a number of ways. But the great thing is that I get to go into a school building every day and be that practitioner and have all of the knowledge that I've learned from all of these venues to improve upon my practice. Because improving upon my practice as a principal is what's going to allow me to be able to do that for my teachers and for my students. Earlier today, when one of the panelists were speaking, Daniel was his name, and he said that education hasn't changed much in 10 years when you look at it. I was just having a conversation with one of my colleagues the other day saying, 50 years ago, if you walked into a school, you knew it was a school. There would be classrooms, there would be desks, and there would be all of these things, and you knew you were in a school. We could take the labels off of all of our schools, and people could just walk in and say, this is still a school. And we were having that very conversation around what he was speaking of, thinking, quite frankly, about how our world changes so much. Cell phones are very different today than they were 10 years ago. And really then thinking about schools and saying, how are we making sure that education is being as flexible as we need it to be in terms of our students? And so I thought he must have been peering into my leadership team meeting last week because I was engaging my teacher leaders in that same conversation. And so it's nice to know that we're all talking about the same thing because that means like something has to happen, right? We're going to get to the right answers around what's truly going to change this work for students. My presentation today is really focused around principal leadership on teacher quality. That's what I know and understand in my work as a principal. And I think it's important for us not to always separate the teacher and the principal, because to be very honest, a principal is still a teacher very much and should be, and that's what keeps us true as leaders to the work that has to be done. If we ever forget that we're teachers, then it becomes pretty dangerous because we then are not building those relationships and an understanding around what we have to do. So as I go through with you, I'm just sharing really some quotes out there around different themes, and I've put out there some articles and research that you can go back and read to further support some of my discussion. The first one is principals directly impact the quality of teaching in their buildings. We hire the teachers, we support the teachers, we have to understand the teachers in the context of who they are in the classroom and who they are when we leave our buildings to get the most of what it is that they need to allow them to be effective. The Wallace Foundation has had research out for a while saying that the principal is the second best, most impactful process to student achievement after the teacher. And I've thought about that a lot lately. And I'm saying absolutely, the teacher is directly impacting the students in the classroom, whether that may be the 120 students that come through their classrooms every day. But I feel a strong sense of responsibility for making sure that every single teacher in my building is instructing all of those children in their classrooms as I would want someone to instruct for my son, Aiden McKnight, who's 3 years old now, but will be in a public school setting. And I feel a very strong sense of responsibility around that. And so that means, as I think about my work as a principal, I have to realize that I do have an impact on, for me, the 753 students that enter my building every day, and I have to have a great context of that in terms of how to work with my teachers. So I say that just to highlight and elevate the understanding that principals directly impact the quality of teaching in their buildings. Now, with that said, I just want to point out a few hot topic pieces that many are talking about in terms of how it relates to teacher quality and some of the challenges in education. All right, so let's start with the first one, hiring quality teachers. One of the most important things that we do as building level administrators, and that's not just teachers. To me, that's anybody that comes in contact with my children. My assistant principal, who may be tuned in, tells everybody a joke that I interviewed her 5 times before I hired her, over the phone, in person, over text, making sure I knew exactly who she was and what her skill set was. And it's interesting because we laugh about it now, but what we have as a common practice in our building is that, we go to that extent of looking at who our best teachers are for our children in that same manner. So that's not just checking references for where they're coming from currently, but it's checking references from where they have ever worked in their career, because I also want to look at the consistency of a teacher. And so really thinking about that. And I think next to also thinking about hiring quality teachers, we also have to think about how we're building great teachers. So what I may do to support my teachers who've been teaching for 5 to 10 years is very different from what I'm doing for my teachers who are coming into the profession. And we always talk about the importance of differentiating for our students. It is critical that we differentiate for the levels of our teachers, and making sure that we have to first know them very well to know how we need to differentiate for their needs. And that could be a number of things. It could be around classroom management. It could be around building opportunities to get them more engaged in their pedagogy. It could be how do you lesson plan specifically for the needs of a variety of students, but knowing what that is. And so then that directly goes into everybody's discussing how do we improve teaching and learning. Well, I think as a building principal, it's important to know that, one, that's our very first job. In addition to keeping students safe, we have to understand what teaching and learning really is and make sure that we are absolutely dedicated to make sure that we are improving our staff opportunities to collaborate, discuss, and do whatever they need to do to build their capacity to be great teachers so that ultimately our students are learning. Third one, closing the achievement gap. So we know that that's a very important topic that we're discussing. Oftentimes when I'm doing presentations, I talk about that equity work being so important. And when I look at, and it's not easy, it's very difficult, and I'll tell you what's most difficult about this work around equity and race, because we've all had our experiences that have developed us as individuals in this world, and education pushes us into a situation in which we may interact, try to understand, and familiarize ourselves with something that may be very different from us, whether it's our culture, whether it is who we're teaching, how families interact from different cultures other than our own, and it's important to understand that. And I wrote down, we need to be aware of and understand factors that influence trying to close that achievement gap, which is an understanding around race, equity, having a historical context to truly understand, and also bringing in that socioeconomic piece that always has to be considered when we think about how we're working with students and families, and building the capacity of our teachers to do that same work. And that requires digging deep, doing self-evaluation, self-reflection, and coming to some truths that you may not even know have existed. But it's important to get there because we're working with students and families that may have a need that we don't particularly understand. And I think in order to serve them well, we have to understand them. And then implementing teacher evaluation measures effectively. So we've talked about that. It was said earlier today. It should not be about sorting teachers. That's interesting that some people think otherwise. It truly has to be about building investment, teachers building investment in their professional learning and the importance of them reflecting on their practices. What we want in teacher evaluation process is that investment and not just compliance. Because if we get just compliance, that's not allowing, for that level of reflection that needs to happen. And so that means that it's around those conversations. It's around looking at a triangulation of data, student performance data, teacher learning data, professional development, all of those things. So those are just some things that are impacting, school reform and how we're looking at leaders impacting these circumstances. So really quickly, I'm going to go through 4 things that I think are leadership priorities that impact teacher quality. And I think they're pretty simple and to the forefront. I'll first start with instructional leadership. And it's so important for principals to be familiar with curriculum goals and how teachers are facilitating learning in their classrooms to truly impact that process. It does not mean that me as a principal, I have to understand all of the learning goals in my orchestra class. I was a former English teacher, or PE, and I never played sports. However, it's important for us to do a root cause analysis as a school and look at various sources of data: student academic performance data, teacher learning data, student perception data, because perception is real, and really get down to what is it that we need to focus on instructionally as a school-wide, and then give the flexibility to our department leaders and teachers to say, okay, well, we're doing okay there in this bigger instructional piece in our school. What do we need to dwindle that down to within our department that we can get better at as it relates to this? And principals need to know how to support teachers and departments in doing that. It's very important. And for every building, the instructional needs could be different. What my instructional needs were in my building 5 years ago are extremely different from what they are today. And I have to make those adjustments in order to be able to do that. Secondly, we've talked about this. I could say it 1,000 times. We must establish PLCs, effective, not just have a PLC meeting, but effective PLCs in our buildings. And building leaders, we need to know how to support those PLCs. Every PLC in my building may be in a different place in terms of the work that they are doing. I need to understand where they are and what their needs are so that I can better support them or the leader of that PLC to do that effectively. So that does mean that I should be there. That means that I should be a part of the conversation. That means that I am responsible as a building leader for going and providing the professional development things to further support that work. Teachers have to have a process where they are collaborating, they are talking, they are being innovative with their ideas, and they're actually constantly looking at how is my practice impacting student learning. If it's not, then what do I need to do differently? Providing feedback is so important. I am originally from South Carolina, and I think that treating people nice is important. I value people, I value relationships, and one thing that I get asked a lot about is, you are so honest, but people hear you and they will do what you ask them to do. My thought is, as long as we can have an honest conversation and there is no ill intent, and there never should be, because if it's all about being successful, all of us being successful for the benefit of students, then it's about them. It's never about us. And as long as we can have a conversation and both people walk away with their dignity intact, then that's important. And so when we provide feedback, we need to think about, one, what are the conditions in our buildings as building leaders to allow us to be able to have this ongoing work around providing that feedback and why it's definitely important. The conditions in the school must support that this is the expectation, this is the work that we will engage in, we will discuss, we will do it in a respectful way, and it's not about gotchas or any of that. It's just about all of us being successful in the work that we do for students, another critical part. And finally, the effective use of teacher evaluation processes. This is a hot topic. I've had the pleasure of working with the Maryland State Department of Education as we look at how we want to implement teacher evaluation process and keeping on the forefront that we are doing that to frame conversations to help teachers actually and principals be reflective in their practices. And understanding that's what this should be about. And as we look at teacher evaluation process, we've got to know our teachers, and we can't say, well, this is this performance on this assessment, and this then reflects what type of teacher you are. Well, teachers are human beings. We're all human beings, and so we would never want one measure of anything to just define us as a person. If I make one mistake, or if I make a mistake as a wife, I would not want my husband to say, you are a bad wife, or my child, who I have one of and I'm learning to be a parent, say, you didn't do that right, you're a bad parent. No. And so we have to think about that perspective as we think about working with our teachers. And that's why I love the student learning outcome process, SLOs, that we're engaging in right now. And I remember it was like music to my ears a few weeks ago when one of my teachers said in the staff meeting, I just love how the work is so connected for us. And they're like, we are working in our PLCs. Our SLOs as teachers are written based on the work that we're doing in our school improvement plan. And this is also the work that we're learning about in our PLCs and in our staff meetings. And I'm like, yes, that's what we want. We don't want it to be like it's one more thing added on. So it's about making those connections for teachers. Because in that SLO process, there's several things we've got to remember and keep on the forefront. What do we want our teachers to know and be able to do to support our students? For me as a principal, I'm thinking, what do I need my teacher leaders to know and be able to do to support the teachers? And then I need to bring that question back to me as well, all the time, because I'm never taken out of the equation. If success is not happening, I'm starting with me. What am I not doing correctly? And so I have to say, what do I need to do and know, what do I need to know and be able to do as a principal to effectively lead my staff? So if we're all asking that question in the process of evaluation, out of evaluation, then I think that keeps us true to the purpose of the work. And I'll end with principal leadership influences teacher quality. And there's a lot of research and conversations out there about the influence of teacher quality and student achievement through retaining high-quality teachers. I think we all have to constantly think about what we're doing to support that work. Last spring, April, I went and, I'm a problem solver and I'm always thinking and I'm always thinking, what am I not doing? What am I not doing? And last year, I was like, why am I not going back to my alma mater and talking to student teachers? Because they need to know when they come into the classroom what to expect. And I want to give them a realistic understanding of that. And I don't want them going in this profession because they're excited about having summers off or having a week and a half off during winter break. That is not what this is about, because when you actually get to those times, you are so emotionally burnt out. It's like a summer could feel like a week. And I remember going and having that conversation with all of the teachers who were currently on the field at South Carolina State University, and I was appreciative that I got an opportunity to speak with them about this. And I really spoke with them about understanding what the work of a teacher really is and how it really can be about changing lives and supporting students and learning and feeling good about what you're doing, regardless of what everybody is saying about the profession, and all the things that need to be considered in preparing themselves for that work. This was in April. On Friday night, I received an email from one of the teachers that was there saying, I completed my student teaching. Like, I'd love to talk more. I'm ready to do this. And so it's about, constantly thinking of what can we do to encourage teachers and make them feel good about what they're doing. I have teachers that I've worked with since my first year as an assistant principal who I called up when I became a principal, can you come work with me? And they're like, absolutely. And so it's about building those relationships and establishing that. And Friday, I had a teacher just walk into my office. I happened to be there because I'm hardly ever there. And she said, I am struggling with this period. Can we talk about it? Absolutely. So we talked about the students, and she left. She was like, okay, I'm going to do what you said. And then when I saw her, again, she was like, I did it and it worked. I was like, good. So anytime you see me, whether I'm in your classroom doing an informal or not, let's talk about that. And I'm going to follow up and come to that period and see how things are going, and we can talk about it. So those informal conversations actually aren't in the context of an evaluation, but it's me getting to know my teachers so they can feel supported. So it's remembering those things. And I said I could talk forever, and I think I will stop there. Thank you. Look forward to your questions.